Well, hello to everybody here. It's Teresa Sanderson. Oh my gosh, I'm excited to connect with you again today for another episode of the Dare to Do Nursing Differently podcast. Oh my gosh, couldn't even get that out. I have a wonderful guest with us today, and his name is Matt Harless. And Matt helps nursing students and new graduate nurses, kind of mentors them as they get started in the profession. And he's also, just got a heart of service. So Matt, I want to welcome you and thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me. I definitely enjoy talking about these subjects.
Absolutely. And, I really feel like today is, now is the time that nurses need to be having serious conversations about serious things. So I'm excited. Before we get started with all of that, what I would like to do is allow our audience to just get to know you a little bit. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about, your background in nursing, the kind of work you've done, and that kind of thing.
Certainly. Before I was a nurse, I was adult protective services in the state of Indiana, and we investigated abuse, neglect, and exploitation of adults. Um, I was able to witness an individual that we saved from her home, and she'd almost died. And we brought her quickly to the emergency department and even into the ICU. And she was very critical when she first came in, almost died really. And just to see what went on and to know that we were instrumental in that, seeing what the nurses did. We had the opportunity to follow her through med surg and rehab. She went to skilled nursing and then finally assisted living. She was definitely like a big victory for us. But what I personally came back from that was just seeing what nurses actually did,
Yeah.
and it opened my heart, my mind to the idea of becoming a nurse. So I went to school and started in the hospitals at that time. My first job in the hospital was in a psychiatric facility. I tell people I spent 10 years in a psych hospital, but I was a staff
Love it.
member. But it was very unique. We did chronic pain. I worked on all the units, so with children and everybody. And then we transitioned out of that, and I was able to move from that to the resource team at that hospital. So once I began as a resource nurse, or pretty quickly after my first year, I just started mentoring the new graduates, the students, and everybody there. And I became the guy that people wanted to learn from because I can't really hide my heart. Like if you played poker with me, you'd know when I had a good hand. But I just can't hold back. And my patients, I can't say they all love me, but I have built relations with people that I've seen over the years, and just I just have a heart to always think about that person in the bed and what would I want to receive if I was the person in there. And it's led me to rethink and reshape a lot of what standard practice really is. And I try to follow the models, the nursing process. I follow that to the T, and I've also, make sure that I follow Maslow's hierarchy of need because that's what I was taught. I think it's kind of going out of favor now, but um, everything that we do needs to point back to this methodology. And I think a lot of times I see what I think I see is this people, nurses that are just reacting to what's going on around them and not being a force for actually improving these people's lives. I mean, we can get through a 12-hour shift doing the bare minimum, but
Mhm.
I don't really think that's the calling of nursing.
Wow. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Powerful statement there. Powerful, powerful statement. We can get through a 12-hour shift. Um, yeah, but I don't think that's the true calling of nursing. I have to agree with you. I have to agree with you. And I think as you mentioned, the nursing process and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we tend to discount those things. And what I've learned about the nursing process, even in business, is that the nursing process is a fantastic tool for growing and scaling a business. When we
Yeah.
begin with assessment, diagnose, make the plan, the interventions, it's
No.
it's it's everything. It's everything that you need for what you're doing. But I also love what you said about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I can remember a time when I was working as a director of clinical services at it's like a long-term acute care hospital in Austin, and it was part of a 4 hospital system. And I remember all 3 of the other hospitals were working on very elite, kind of ideas and projects to improve in nursing. And I was working on, is everybody getting a bath and is everybody eating? You know,
Yeah,
I
I
really
know.
felt, yeah, I really felt like, oh my gosh, everybody's so far ahead of me. But if we're not getting these things right, we won't be able to do anything else. But I was
Yeah,
definitely the odd girl out, really saying, skin's not going to get better if we're not cleaning people, if we're not turning people, if we're not, all the things. But I love the simplicity of what you bring to the table and just saying, we have to be thinking about Maslow.
right. Well,
Yeah.
what I find fascinating is whenever I have a homeless patient, I mean, they're homeless, and we bring in these educators who are just following guidelines for best practice. And some people push back whenever I say best practice, but that doesn't mean it's every practice, because there's homeless people that are just never going to have a healthy diet. The idea of
Yeah.
them eating fruits and vegetables is wonderful, but how is that sustainable when you don't have, a method to store them?
Yeah.
It's like I think we get kind of messed up on exactly where we need to be on these levels, and I think
Yeah.
I think providing shelter and helping people, to get food and healthy, clean water is gonna
Mhm.
is gonna do a lot more than, you know, this is how cardism works. Because,
Mhm.
I can get you to swallow the pill, but I can't get you to understand a daily weight when you don't have a home or a scale to weigh yourself. I mean,
Right.
we just get the cart before the horse, I believe.
Yeah. I agree. I agree. And I miss in some of this, I've been in nursing more than 30 years, and so I miss a lot of just the common sense things
Yeah,
that we should be able to see, right? I mean, does this really make sense for this person at
yeah,
this time? And I think that's really important to just know, is it appropriate? Is what we're recommending really appropriate when in actuality, if we're working with a homeless person, they're going to be lucky to find a clean, dry place to sleep tonight,
yeah,
and a little something to eat, no matter what it is.
exactly.
Yeah.
And most of what's available for homeless people or people that are, even lower incomes, it's all
Sure.
carb related. And
Oh,
what's the
yeah.
biggest thing we're dealing with is diabetes. And it's,
Yeah.
I could go on and on. I think at the bedside though, we just need to be skillful. Like it's one
Mhm.
like I talk about superheroes, and that's how I
Mhm.
try to relate to some people because it really works. But if you think about it, like Superman was given a special power and different ones, whatever. But Batman, he just has his tool belt. And it's like,
Yeah.
as nurses, we have our tool belts, and we need to know when to pull what tool out at that
Mhm.
time. And that only comes from knowing your patient and knowing more than just their heart rate, and just their lung sounds, but knowing them as a person, and giving them the dignity and respect to just be themselves, and then
Mhm.
taking them from where they are to maybe just one step further.
I love that. And I think it's such valuable information because yeah, I can remember the days when I was a telemetry technician. I don't even want to tell you how long ago that was. But,
Yeah.
if ever you just saw this flat line, it's like, don't trust the machine. Go look at the
Yes.
patient. That's the first thing is, and so you're right, the vital signs are a piece of the assessment, but they're not all of it. Nurses have this beautiful holistic scope to be able to, I mean, I remember talking to a physician about this, and he said, but nurses are taking vital signs. Isn't that the assessment? No, no, that's not the
I
assessment.
know.
The vital signs are a piece of the equation, but goodness, the assessment happens between our ears.
Exactly. And what I
Just
do with these kids is not only like every nursing student knows about the head to toe assessment, but who assesses themselves? I mean,
Mhm.
he who even like looks at yourself. Am I in the right space today? Am I ready for this shift? And like my burnout was definitely related to the fact that I wasn't taking care of myself. I was
Mhm.
also in an unhealthy circumstance that I had to get out of, But it wasn't until I started the journey of finding health for myself that I was able to
Mhm.
recognize how unhealthy the place around me was.
Wow.
And I get kids
Mhm.
to realize that assessment is way beyond that head to toe.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So important. So important. Wow. I'm just blown away by the simple and very profound truths that we're reflecting on today, right? Because so much of what we do is not rocket science. It's just, are they fed? Are they
Yeah.
comfortable? Are they clean? We start
Yeah.
there. And then from there, we're building that trust to go to the next level. What's the next thing you need? And what's the next thing you need? And wow, I love that. And to me, that's very inspiring because I think nurses, and as you said, the kids or the new nurses, new grads,
Exactly.
nursing students, um, feel like from the moment, you graduate, you kind of put your running shoes on and you never stop. So
Yeah.
there's not this time to really think, how am I today? We're not trained to think about that, about how we are. And and I feel like healthcare as a whole has been treating nurses almost like robotic type creatures that, you should be able to work, 12 hours 3 or 4 times a week. And if your 12 hours stretches into 14, or if we need you for a, 16, you should be able to do that. And thinking about holiday scheduling, I'm going to be doing a lot of talking about nurses working during the holidays in the next few weeks because
Oh, yeah.
I think it's I think it's hard. It's hard to miss out on events with your family. It's hard to know, the holidays are coming up and somebody's got to work because it's a 24/7 thing that we do. But what would you say about that? And how can nurses kind of take care of themselves and, in during the holiday season and maybe even just on a daily shift? How can they support themselves better?
I think when it comes to the holidays, we've got to be able to set boundaries. And I've always been strong on the boundaries I set with my employer. So I've never been on the call list that they
Mhm.
would call you in on a day you're not working. And
Wow.
if they did call me, I wouldn't answer. Um,
Mhm.
if they left a message, I wouldn't return it. So, and I try to be the best employee when I'm clocked in, and I
Mhm.
think there's something missing in that statement because I think a lot of people are worried about social media or like they're distracted when they're working. So when
Mhm.
you're there, you really need to be mindful of what your expectations are of you.
Mhm.
But the holidays and at home, I mean, I feel like we have this great privilege to be involved in people's lives when they're going through some of the most scariest health conditions on the planet. And we carry our own secondary trauma with us when we leave. It's obvious, I think, for any nurse that's been off for a week and you have anxiety the night before you go to bed. If you don't understand that you're dealing with secondary trauma as a result of what you've dealt with previously, then that's your red flag wake up call. When it comes to that, I think it's important to turn your phones off or um, allow yourself that time to recover and recuperate. I think a lot of nurses are just gaslit to believe that we are the ones who are emotionally and physically responsible for everything that goes on. And I'm very careful in
Mhm.
the concept of outcomes because I
Mhm.
believe I believe I don't own outcomes. I feel like I own education. I own assessment. I own planning, implementation,
Mhm.
but I don't own outcomes. Outcomes are the responsibility of the patient. And I separate myself from the outcomes because emotionally, when that patient dies, I can't be the one responsible for that decision.
Yeah.
And if a patient gets better, I'm not
Mhm.
responsible for their healing either,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
I had a patient die during COVID. He was on 10 liters of oxygen and he was in the hospital and he said COVID was the invention of a political party. And we all were like, you're on 10 liters of oxygen. But he signed the paperwork, he took the oxygen off, and he died in his car in the parking lot.
Oh,
If
wow.
I took ownership of his outcome, how could I
Yeah.
live with myself today?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Wow. Wow. And so this brings up another point of, you know, being really able to support nurses, though, because
yeah,
regardless of not being attached to the outcome, that is a moment that is going to shake your world, having
yeah,
an outcome like that, right? And I've heard similar stories of the patient who was treated in the ER for a, came in complaining of chest pain and was discharged and, had a heart attack right in the driveway. There's all these things, that happen. And then we as nurses are left to kind of sort through how, what was my part in that? Did I have a part in that? And like you're saying, am I attached to the outcome? But again, we don't necessarily get that kind of training. We get told in nursing school, don't make it personal,
yeah,
don't get personal. But what does that mean? Because human relationships are personal. So there's a skill in that of being able to separate yourself from the outcome. Can you talk
right.
a little bit about that?
Well, it was black and white for me in the beginning because I worked in the psychiatric hospitals, and we did everything in our power to create the safest environments possible. And I mean, we went to extremes, the
Mhm.
ligature assessments on the units, the clothing that people could wear, every
Yeah.
little detail. And yet, um, people were still hurting themselves with the sheets we were giving them. And you kind of get to a point where you're just like, somebody that's determined to fail will, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
we have an obligation. I think we have a very deep responsibility to offer hope and offer those choices through our education, through our experience, through our examples,
Mhm.
But but when it comes to like the ultimate decision of the patient, I find peace in the fact when I find that a patient doesn't want to stop smoking. I
Mhm.
can chart very eloquently that the patient is in the pre-contemplative state of change, you know,
Mhm.
and I felt supported by the psychiatric department or people that
Yeah.
understand the terminology because, I've offered, they've rejected. We can
Yeah.
offer again, but
Mhm.
those kinds of things are kind of where we're at.
Mhm.
There's certain things that we get diagnosed with, like cancer and whatnot, that is going to kill you no matter what. What are we
Mhm.
going to do in the time that we have with you? How much peace are we going to be able to give you? And whenever I have a cancer patient ask for a pain medicine, it's just automatic. It's like, oh, I want to give you that as fast as possible. Whenever I have an addict ask me for pain medicine, I want to be like, is there a coping mechanism first? You
Yeah.
know, and that's where I talk about just skillfully knowing which one needs what. And
Mhm.
if you aren't sophisticated in understanding some of these things, I get it. I mean, there are nurses that just won't reach this level. And
Mhm.
I tell
Sure.
people all the time, there's only two reasons why I'm quiet around a staff person. I'm either trying to understand you, or once
Mhm.
I have understood you, we just don't agree. Like there's a
Mhm.
lot of nurses out there that have their license and they're active and whatnot, but I don't think they ever have a critical thought during their shift. And
Mhm.
yeah, they're doing their thing. I just don't get it. So I kind of just stay away.
Yeah.
The other thing I learned in adult protective services was that when you see an abusive situation, you don't jump on the abuse. You don't jump on the negative. They say you need
Mhm.
to give at least seven positives before you ever give one negative. So I
Mhm.
always try to find just what is most positive going on with someone else. And when I find a peer that's maybe engaged in something I don't agree with, I try to find something where I do. That gives us a relationship to build on. So,
Fantastic. Oh my
yeah,
gosh. I could continue this conversation for a long, long time.
thank
And
you.
oh, I love so much of your perspective. And I think, yeah, it's, when it comes to thinking about nursing culture, is the glass half full, is the glass half empty, so much of all of that just begins between our ears. And being emotionally intelligent, also leads the way for us being able to, how can I find the good in this person? Something
Yeah.
that we can build upon. And that's where relationships start. And so I love what you're doing. I love your perspective. It sounds like you are well placed in what you're doing to mentor and support nursing students and new grad nurses. So I want to give you a shout out there because right now there's about 33% of new nurses who are quitting the profession after just 2 years,
Yeah.
and something like 18% who are quitting the profession after their first year. So the support that you're providing and that you have available, that comes from, you know, time working on the floor, it comes from, it's the voice of
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
It's so very valuable and so needed. So I want to thank you for joining me today for this interview.
Well, thank you so much. I've just come from burnout to resilience, and I just want to bring as many people as I can with me.
I love that. I love that. And so before we finish up, Matt, please share with our listeners and our viewers, how can they connect with you out in the world?
Well, I'm only on LinkedIn, so my profile is Matthew Harless or Matt Harless. I can't remember which, but email address is just matthew.harless@gmail.com. But I don't have a website or anything fancy. And what I do is word of mouth, and it's just all related. And I end up talking to people all over the country, and I get advertisements all the time. I'm busy enough. Let me just say that. But I think when you have something of quality, something of worth, people will search you out.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Amen to that. All right, Matt, I want to thank you again for joining us today. Definitely enjoyed the conversation. Can't wait to watch all the good that you're going to do in the world for nurses. So thank you again.
Yes.
Yeah, and to all of our viewers out there, thank you for tuning in. This concludes this episode. I'll see you next time on Dare to Do Nursing Differently. Bye for now.
Thank you.